realized that that might have come off as cryptic, like send me an angel right now. It was not intended to be the song of the industry update, but maybe it is. I don't know. Jim, Erika, how are you?
So,
Doing good, warmer.
yeah,
Finally, right? This time of year, I'm like, the real estate market starts to heat up. We hope, we'll see. And I'm waiting on the weather to warm up. It all kind of just goes together, right?
yeah.
All right, here we go. So, Rockwall County active listings went from 82 last week down to 70. Less on the market. And I think
Yeah.
that's a trend. We're going to see it. Solds went from 55 down to 43. I'm not overly concerned about that because 55 had a lot to do with the end of the month. It looks like if you look through January, 40 closings a week was kind of a normal trend. So we're holding trend there, it looks like. There's 52 properties pending. So if you look though, a week ago, there was 49 and we only increased 3 here. Under active option a week ago, it was 22. We increased 3 here. There's 6 new houses under contract compared to a week ago, but inventory went down 12. Where'd they go?
I think a lot of it has to do with what we had last week. I started thinking more about it, and we started having the weather come in on Wednesday, and everybody, you get a little bit of the wet stuff, and things get a little dicey in the Metroplex. Add some ice into the mix, and everything shuts down.
Yeah.
So I think some of it has to do with that, and then just being the beginning of the month. I think it'll be interesting as we're doing these, looking at the beginning of the month. If we look at the beginning of January, I know we're coming out of the new year, but we had low numbers and then they started to increase.
Yeah.
Well,
So you're
temporary
saying
off
these
market went up, and so did expireds. So you've got,
7 people didn't want you
Yeah.
tracking slush through their house.
yeah. So that affects the numbers when you look at that as
Yeah.
well.
So look at Collin County on a larger scale, 270 listings a week ago down to 217. That's a pretty big drop in 1 week. Contracts went up 9 here, went up 6 here. Closings went down to 190. It's the lowest closing week Collin County's seen in a while. So
If they're off market,
could be.
Yeah, I saw that, and so it was too big of a number to ignore. And what happened was Perry Homes took off all their homes, and so Perry Homes went temporarily off the market in Collin County.
Ah.
Yeah, it was odd.
Interesting. All right, Dallas, 597 active properties a week ago, 440. Huge drop. Closings went from 433 to 372. Not overly anything here. Pendings look about the same. We went up a little bit in pending contracts here. The biggest number is active inventory is coming down. So let's talk about this for a second. So, of course, if we have a number of houses listed, and then our agents go out and sell these houses, if we're not replacing the inventory on the shelf, do you think of like a clothing store? People walk in every day and buy a shirt off the shelf. But the question is, if they're not restocking the shelves, that inventory inside the store goes down. At some point in time, it becomes a problem to the top line revenue, meaning there's not going to be enough inventory for people to buy. Real estate's very similar. And okay, there's 440 homes active on the MLS in Dallas County right now, and there's 70 active in Rockwall County. Doesn't sound like there's a problem, but you realize when you start getting micro into price markets, that can look really thin real quickly. Jim, Erika, comments?
I agree with you.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Jim.
I know, I was going to say, I being at the end of the month, I started diving into some of the larger numbers of what we were looking at. And when you start getting into kind of the nitty gritty of what did January as a whole look like compared to last January, the month over month trends, year over year, it was down about 5%, but we're down 35% since pre-pandemic. So new listings coming in. But the bigger number I saw were the month over month. Month over month, we usually see an increase in new listings December to January. This month or this year, we saw a decrease of 5%. But the big number was that increase is usually 65% going from December to January in Rockwall County. And so instead of going up 65%, we went down 5%.
So hang on, let me get clarity on what you're saying. So you're saying there was 65% more listings historically in January that came on the market than would come on the market in December.
So this December going into January, so the number in December was 5%. I'm sorry, the number in January was 5% lower than the number in December for new listings. It typically goes up 65%.
That's
but this year we're down 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the weird part though, that I see we're selling more houses than we've ever sold. So it's kind of a little bit of an inverse effect, meaning, yeah, we've got less inventory, but our velocity, or not our velocity, our volume of transactions is actually up, which just goes to show what a great time it is to sell real estate right now. But nonetheless, I think it's an important concept to understand. I'm not overly concerned. 1 week, bad weather, people don't want sludge going in their house. But we've been saying for a couple of weeks since we've been doing this, activities. You got to go drive listings.
Yeah.
We got to create the market as a real estate industry, because I promise you the opportunity is out there. People will list their home if the right message is floated in front of them. Not everybody, obviously, but the amount of equity people have in these houses now creates motivation. Almost similar, like, I'm not an advocate for gambling, hashtag disclaimer, but if you ever bought a lottery ticket, on the bottom of that lottery ticket, it says you're going to go win $500 million, your brain starts turning and you're like, oh, I'll buy a boat, I'll buy an island, I'll buy blah, blah, blah. Well, people do that with smaller dollar amounts too. And if you called somebody and said, hey, you got $200,000 equity in your house, they're human. They're going to start thinking about that chunk of money and what could happen with that money, whether it's something responsible or irresponsible. Is we're not judgment around that. It's just our job to say, hey, if you were to cash out of your house today, this amount of money could be put in your pocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's the human nature going.
Yeah, I think there's a real opportunity if we look at it this way of if there's that much of a shortage. The trends say that more people are saying their houses longer, but not that much more. And so I think there's a lot of people just kind of sitting and waiting. I think when interest rates go up, there's going to be, I don't want to be the miss out on where the rates were. And so you're going to have a lot of people kind of scrambling. But in saying that, it is interesting if we look at November numbers. November going into compared to January, we have 30% less inventory on average throughout the month, and our days on the market went up 7 days. So we had less inventory and we went up more days on the market. A lot of that has to do with the million plus price range, which is about a quarter of our inventory right now.
Yep.
But we've got to pay attention to those things and make sure we're communicating the right things to everybody that's out there. And we're hitting this concept. We like to talk about supply and demand in economics and how it compares to real estate. But we also got to start looking at price stickiness, right? There's this resistance that starts happening where it doesn't matter what supply and demand are doing. Prices start leveling off a little bit.
Absolutely. I'm looking for this article that you sent, Jim, about the showings. And I think it's this one. Nope, I lost it. But anyway, I'll find it and come back to it. But basically it said the Dallas market, here we go. Housing demand, showing listings per listing in Dallas Fort Worth is among the highest in nation. So just speaking to that concept of demand, right?
Mhm.
Supply and demand. If I'm an agent and I'm prospecting for listings, or I'm talking to my database and I'm having an equity conversation with them around the value of their home and the equity inside of that value, and I'm telling them this article right here, that should be every conversation in front of every potential seller right now, is equity, housing demand, and what that means for them. Because here it is in black and white on the Dallas Business Journal talking about how Dallas Fort Worth has more buyer demand than any other city in the country right now. Anything you'd add to that?
No, I think
It's like
that's
how
perfect.
you're, go ahead.
Yeah,
I just changing the conversation in terms of equity is something our agents need to pivot and start doing now. Because I think they talk to sellers about the equity in their home, but they're not relating it back to how it benefits them and getting the brain turning in. Because yeah, everyone has the lottery conversation. What would you do with your $500 million? So I think turning the conversation into a positive with the seller around equity is key. So, and then you just tie it into the facts with the emotion.
Yeah, and you hit a word there of conversation. We need to be having conversations. And I look at our own group, and we had certain people in our own group during the snowstorm calling people and having conversations, and they had good conversations because people were home. But if you're a new agent trying to figure out, all right, how do I get a new listing? This is a great thing to be able to communicate and circle prospect. Circle prospecting is great right now.
Oh, huge, huge. Anyway, we talk about leading indicators and lag indicators, and an easier way to understand that is there are measures in our industry that talk about the front windshield of a car, meaning, hey, this is what's coming in the future. And then there's what's called lag measures, which talks about the rear view mirror of our industry, which is where we've been. So we look at stats, and you go to these stats here, and closings is where we've been, right? Like that's already happened. And most of these measures are pretty much already happened. We can't necessarily affect these per se. We're just trying to understand the market. But when you get to, I keep losing my place. When you get to showings is a lead measure in the real estate industry. It shows us what's coming in the future. So to any potential seller, any potential real estate agent, this is the measure that says, hey, the next 30, 60, 90 days of our real estate market is hot because these people are out there looking at houses right now. And it's pretty important. All right, I want to move to some predictions here. So on Market Watch, it said home price growth may return to normalcy, which I'm not sure what that word means anymore. 5 economists and real estate pros predict what will happen in the housing market in 2022. Hashtag predictions, right? So prediction number 1, mortgage rates will rise. I think we've talked about that. I think everybody that's not living under a rock understands that mortgage rates are going to creep up in 2022, and that's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I think agents got to get real comfortable with this conversation. Buyer, would you rather pay $50,000 cash over asking price, or would you rather pay 0.5 point higher in interest rate? Because and keep your cash. Because if when the rates were so low, the demand was so high, you were having to chunk big amounts of cash to get into houses. A rate going up is going to slow down that demand, which is causing people just to do stupid things with money. Not stupid, but in the sense that it's the only way to win, right? It's crazy. So I think that's prediction number one. Prediction number two, home price growth may return to normalcy. What do you think?
I think if you look at the numbers, we already have. If you look at the last year's home price growth, we went from January to May with about a 27 or 30% growth. Now, if you look at the average home price compared to May to January, this last month, we actually had a 2% price decrease. So from May to January in Rockwall County, now we had ups and downs, but overall that average has stayed exactly the same. I think we're kind of there. If we're going to see an increase, it's going to be in the spring market, I think. But I think we've already returned to normalcy as far as kind of leveling off a bit.
Yeah, and what's normal? 4, 5, 6% price growth, right?
Yeah.
And that's a pretty normal thing. We're going to pop some articles up here in a minute, but the concept of this bubble it doesn't really exist. I think that's clickbait on selling stories these days, but we'll jump into that. Prediction number 3. I hadn't even thought of this until I read this article. So clock is ticking on the interest rate locks of the low interest rates. So all these people have locks on the under 4% in the 3 interest rates, and they're going to expire. So people are really motivated quickly to go get some houses under contract. And I don't know why I hadn't thought of that, but at what point in time do you think that lock expiration is going to hit? I think it's probably come March.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't think of that till I read this article also, and it makes a lot of sense because multiple offers is something that's, I think, normal, but the 2030 was starting to pick back up that we hadn't seen. And so that makes a lot of sense. When I read that, I thought the same thing. I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense on why the bidding wars have gone up since, I would say last quarter. They've gone up tremendously this first quarter from what I'm hearing in our office.
Yeah.
Back to the 2030 offers.
I think that also tells me, Jim, and I want your opinion on that. It also tells me that second quarter 2022 is going to look different than first quarter 2022.
I agree. June is always kind of a weird month anyways. That May, June, some people it's great in May, sometimes it's great in June, but rarely I see anybody that's like, yeah, both were awesome or equally as awesome. But I think that's ultimately why I think if we're going to see that home price increase, it's going to happen in this quarter. Because once those interest rates go up, I think we're going to have people start cooling down a little bit.
I agree. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes when the pendulum swings too far, it just it creates such an acute market that's not really good for all involved. It's kind of our concept. One of our value statements is win-win or no deal, right? Well, this real estate market is not a win-win. It's a win-lose right now for buyers. And we needed to kind of come back a little bit more to a win-win scenario. So economically, everything turns out really good. All right. Prediction
one thing on that. One of the things I've had our group looking at is what is our months of inventory looking like? And I mean, right now it hasn't changed much at all. But in going to what you were talking about in the quarter 3, we could realistically be around about a month and a half to almost 2 months of inventory. So we're saying like 1.5 to 1.8 months of inventory. And if you look at history, I think it was 2018 is when we were around 2 months of inventory. And that was a great market. We were seeing 1 or 2, when multiple offers, you only had 1 or 2 offers in, or 2 or 3. So, I think that's where we really see the change is we have that increase in inventory going into quarter 2 and things just kind of, I think it's great for buyers.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think it's coming. Obviously, prediction 4 is still be a tough market for buyers. I think we've talked about that. Prediction 5, there's still wild cards. The big wild card is the permanency of work from home policies or even hybrid models of employment. You know, people moved out of the cities because they wanted to work from home. And if employers start going, no, 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 we need you back in the office, it could change the policy around where people want to live. But interestingly enough, prediction number 6, spring will bring more activity. Haven't seen it yet. I think it's coming. I think it's bringing buyer demand for sure. We need the sellers to show up to the table.
Mhm.
And activities, and we've talked about that. All right. How to combat real estate commission woes. Erika, you sent this article. What is this?
It's just talking about discounting your commissions, how to combat, and some tactics and strategies around not just going in and taking a lesser commission to get the listing. So I don't know if y'all read it, but that's something it drives me crazy. I think our agents earn their money. And so it just has some ideas on how you combat that. Mindset's the key, knowing your values, the key, your value proposition, talking in terms of net instead of, cost, which I think is what we've been talking about, talking in terms of equity, how much money they're going to make instead of how much money it costs them. And then it does say that historically, if you sell for sale by owners, make less money than if they list it with a real estate agent, even paying the full 6%. So it's really talks about that in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So don't do it.
All right. And then buyer agents commissions fall to lowest point since 2017. These kind of go together, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there's an emotional meter to the consumer around the value of the real estate agent. And when the market is really good, the emotional value of a real estate agent to a consumer is actually goes lower because they don't feel like they need us as much. They feel like they can do it on their own. They get brazen. They feel like all the above, which is not true, and we know that. But remember, that consumer mindset, consumer emotional value. Problem is, we roll over too easy. And we get, I've bought refrigerators, I've bought blinds, somebody wants, a realtor concession. And we roll over so easy because we don't believe in our own value. And you got to get to a place where you understand your worth and this doesn't become a problem. Now, I get it. That's a tough conversation. It's a leadership conversation. But at the end of the day, Jim, market moves back to normal. This becomes less of an issue, no?
Yeah, I think one of the hard things out there right now is you have people like Lennar that are only giving BACs 1%. So that's helping drive it down. But there's going to be a point in time where builders are going to need our help again, selling their inventory. So I think with inventory, I think you're right. This changes the conversation a little bit. But if you're also looking at the overall landscape of what's happening with the Department of Justice, and I've got all these little statements up on my board of what if this happens, just to watch out for, make sure our business is insulated. What happens if buyer agency is paid for by the buyer, or if it goes down to 1%? What happens to your business? And that ultimately becomes know your value, make sure that you're getting the listings in and control your destiny.
Absolutely. And, we talk about buyer rep agreements, right? And when's the last time you read your buyer rep agreement and understand the relationship between what a buyer signing that agreement and your commission? And then the second part of that conversation is, are you really going to enforce it? Because at the end of the day, it used to come up around for sale by owners. They'd drive by, see a sign. If you buy that house, you're going to have to pay my commission. If the seller doesn't pay it, that conversation's kind of gone low for a long time. But maybe it's time to up that conversation a little bit and really go back and look at a buyer rep agreement and go, hey, I need you to understand what this document really means. All right, sorry to burst your bubble, but we're not in one, housing experts say. Bubble means it's gonna pop. And that means there's gotta be some kind of exterior force that comes in and says, hey, what we're experiencing is gonna pop, which means go the other way. And really it's around price increase. I don't want to belabor this point, but at the end of the day, most of the smart people in the world say to us that the market is strong and stable and the demand is so high, and we don't have any weird factors like bad loans and things like that that's going to cause the market to just go in an opposite direction where people would lose money in the real estate business. There's so much equity in their houses.
There's a lot of agents that we have that weren't in the industry back when there was the bad lending. I mean, you basically could fill out an application and put in an amount and you would get approved. So I do want to pause just for a second and just let there be an understanding of how it's different. So the reason that popped is because they were lending money to people that should have never gotten it. And so it brought the foreclosure market at an all-time high. Now it's different. Lending is tightened up. I mean, they even tightened up during quarantine or COVID. You know, the credit scores went up. To get a loan was even harder. So I do think there needs to be an understanding of the difference, because buyers, sellers that may not be, I guess it is, educated around what happened back then. Our agents need to know the difference between the two, because I hear that word all the time. I'm sure you do, Jim, as well. Like, oh, it's gonna burst. I'm like, it's different. It's different than what happened.
So I think the sentence I highlighted says a lot, because what they're talking about is if people are starting to buy real estate based on speculation, meaning I have it as speculation that the value is going to go skyrocketed, that could create a bubble for us.
Sure.
But people aren't buying real estate based on speculation right now. They're buying real estate based on needs, and they're overpaying, which is driving values up, but they're not buying it on speculation. They're actually buying it on needs.
Right.
Any thoughts there?
No, I think there's solid core dynamics there that are driving it. You're exactly right.
Right. All right. This is interesting. D.R. Horton plans to grow its rental operation by more than $1 billion in the fiscal year. The other article said Dallas-Fort Worth ranks third nationally in number of build-to-rent houses. Our housing industry is going to be owned by a lot of institutional money, and it's just something to keep our eyes on. It'd be nice to be able to buy some of these homes, but wait until these builders start just buying them and renting them and doing it like a hedge fund or something. It'd be interesting. So I like to start and end on time. Here's my question. We talked in a lot of different circles this week, but what is the summary of our conversation? What do we need to have in our minds over the next 7 days as we're going forward?
I would say it goes back to conversations around one, it's a skill set. We've talked about it every single week, that this is a skill set market. So it's honing in on your skills, but I also think it's conversations with your database around equity in homes. I think that's where you go and win, and what we need to focus on.
Yeah, we're heading into, I think it's going to be a really good spring. I think there's going to be a lot of people that start coming out of the woodwork. And if you believe in the statement of averages average out over time, we're going to start seeing some of these low new listing numbers start coming up eventually. And so who's going to be taking advantage of it? It's going to be the people that are out there hitting the concrete, not if you're just sitting behind a desk saying, I don't know how to do this. If you don't know how to do it, reach out. This is a great company. You have a lot of people that can help you figure out how to get listings. Everybody can do it.
Jim, can I put you on the spot real quick?
Sure.
So if Jim Duquette was going to record a reel for social media, where you do you dance and you do the pointing and there's 4 little bubbles that pop up. What are the 4 bubbles you would want a seller to read right now?
Oh gosh.
Buyer demand at an all-time high.
Yeah, golly, it's such a, if you start putting it all together, that's such a hard one to go because yeah, your buyer demand's at an all-time high. Prices are starting to, you're hitting that, like I said, that price stickiness. Inventory is still low, interest rates going up. Those are the 4 things right now. But I'm telling everybody, you have to start talking about price stickiness because that is what we're seeing right now. Yeah. If inventory supply is that far down, demand's still up, and you're not seeing go just through the roof, price stickiness. And we have to start getting people off the fence because interest rates go up. We could start seeing that adverse go down.
Yep.
Right.
So I find it interesting, this the reels generation, right? Where they're dancing and doing these pointing things. But at the end of the day, isn't that really what we're talking about? What are the talking points? They're just putting it in a goofy video format, but what are the talking points that you would want a seller to read right now? There's your challenge, Jim. Go create a reel for us.
Get on TikTok.
See me dance.
Bye.